It wasn't an aerial mystery. It was a disaster on the ground. Flight EK521, August 3, 2016. The Boeing 777 touched down on the Dubai runway. But instead of stopping, it turned into a wreck sliding forward, engulfed in flames. 300 people trapped on the boundary between life and death. They had only 90 seconds to escape. Why did the pilots try to take off again in that fateful moment? What was hidden in the black box about the final words exchanged? Fasten your seatbelt and follow the flight to experience the feelings of those 300 people at that very moment, right now. On the morning of August 3, 2016, at Tiruvananthapuram International Airport, India, everything went as usual for one of the busiest commercial flights connecting India with the Middle East. It was Emirates Flight EK521, bound for Dubai. The aircraft operating this flight was a wide-body Boeing 777-300, registration A6 EMW. The Boeing 777-300 series is one of the largest and most reliable twin-engine aircraft in the world. It is equipped with two powerful Rolls-Royce Trent 892 jet engines. With enormous thrust, these engines are the heart of the 777, enabling it to perform long-haul intercontinental flights. The A6 EMW had been in service for about 13 years at the time, completing thousands of flights and undergoing strict regular maintenance according to international standards. In the cockpit, the flight was operated by an experienced crew. Captain, a 34-year-old UAE national. He had a total of 7,447 flight hours, including 5,195 hours on Boeing 777 aircraft. First officer, a 37-year-old Australian national with a total of 5,231 flight hours, of which 3,016 were on the Boeing 777. Both were well-trained, fully certified, and sufficiently experienced. For them, this was just a short, routine journey lasting less than 4 hours. Accompanying them were 18 cabin crew members, who played a crucial role in safety and passenger service. At the airport, preparations were underway in a rush: fuel checks, baggage loading, and final safety inspections. On Flight EK521, there were 282 passengers from 20 different countries. Most were Indian nationals, traveling home or heading to Dubai for tourism or business in the Middle East's commercial and financial hub. They were mothers, fathers, businesspeople, and tourists, unaware of the tragedy that awaited them at their destination. They simply hoped for a safe flight and an upcoming reunion. At exactly 10:30 a.m., local time, EK521 pushed back from the gate, ready for its short journey. At exactly 10:52 a.m., local time, Flight EK521 rolled down the runway and successfully took off from Tiruvananthapuram. The flight in the air proceeded smoothly and quietly, with no issues reported. Passengers relaxed, enjoying Emirates in-flight service as they crossed the Arabian Sea according to the planned route. About 3 hours later, the Boeing 777 began its descent. The captain and first officer started preparing for the approach and landing at Dubai International Airport, one of the busiest airports in the world. The expected landing time was 12:45 p.m., local time. The biggest problem at this moment did not lie with the aircraft, but with the ground. As EK521 entered UAE airspace, the weather conditions had become troubling. Dubai was experiencing strong wind gusts and high temperatures, creating very challenging landing conditions. Although visibility appeared good, the strong, unstable, and sudden winds posed a significant threat to an aircraft on approach. Air Traffic Control, ATC, had issued warnings about rapid changes in wind speed and direction. Despite the warnings, EK521 was cleared to approach runway 12L. At around 12:37 p.m., the Boeing 777-300 passed through the last of the clouds and began aligning for landing. The cockpit was highly focused, with the captain flying the aircraft and the first officer monitoring the instruments, continuously receiving wind data. When the plane was only a few dozen meters above the ground, the wind shear warning suddenly sounded. The 777 began descending faster than expected due to a sudden downdraft pushing it downward. This was an extremely dangerous situation. Immediately, the captain made a critical decision to ensure safety: abort the landing and go around. This is a standard procedure, practiced many times in simulators, but executing it under strong gusty winds and so close to the ground is an extreme challenge, leading to the tragic chain of events that followed. At 12:44 p.m., the captain declared, "Go around." Immediately, the first officer pulled back on the control column to climb the aircraft. According to procedure, when performing a go-around, pilots must advance the throttles to engage full engine thrust and retract the landing gear. However, this was when the chain of technical errors began. The crew did move the throttles to the toga position, but they retracted the landing gear too early, just 3 seconds after thrust was applied. Retracting the gear early was not the main cause, but it was a sign of the crew's haste and stress under severe gusty winds. The worst mistake came immediately afterward. The crew inadvertently, or possibly intentionally, moved the throttles back to idle while the aircraft was still at a very low altitude. Moving the throttles to the idle position meant cutting off engine thrust at the most critical moment. The automatic systems did not activate to compensate. Just 9 seconds after the go-around was initiated, the aircraft began to lose speed and altitude disastrously. The altitude warning system started blaring. The crew realized the problem and tried to re-engage the thrust. However, with massive jet engines like the Rolls-Royce Trent 892, increasing thrust from idle to the required level involves a delay, typically lasting several seconds. Those few seconds proved fatal. The aircraft lost altitude far too quickly. At 12:45 p.m., the Boeing 777-300 struck the ground at the far end of the runway. The plane did not land on its landing gear but on the lower fuselage, at a slight angle of attack. The 777 skidded along the runway, the retracting landing gear colliding and breaking off. Engine number 2 on the right wing slammed onto the runway and was torn from the wing. The aircraft continued to skid, leaving a long trail of fire and debris. It came to a stop in the grass beside the runway, but the detached engine pierced a fuel tank, igniting a small fire near the engine. Inside the cabin, the impact was a severe jolt, but the sturdy design of the 777 helped minimize the force. However, the flames outside did not wait. The final investigation report from the UAE General Civil Aviation Authority identified the root cause as: the crew failed to monitor the aircraft's parameters during the go-around, and in particular, did not ensure that the throttles were set correctly so that the engines could provide sufficient thrust to safely perform the go-around after encountering the unexpected wind shear. In other words, the combination of severe weather conditions and the pilot's error in cutting engine thrust prevented the aircraft from regaining altitude, leading to the catastrophic impact. Evacuation, consequences, and lessons. As the Boeing 777 came to a stop, thick smoke began rising rapidly. In that chaotic moment, the role of the 18 cabin crew members became absolutely critical. They executed their trained procedures flawlessly under immense pressure. In just 90 seconds, the golden standard for emergency evacuation, the crew opened all usable exit doors and guided 282 passengers down the inflatable slides. Although some passengers attempted to take carry-on luggage, slowing the process, the majority complied. All 300 people on board, 282 passengers and 18 crew members, escaped safely. However, the fire spread quickly, engulfing the aircraft just minutes later. The blaze was so intense that the airport fire team faced an enormous challenge. Amidst battling the inferno, a heartbreaking tragedy occurred. A brave UAE firefighter, Jassim Isa Mohammed Hassan, lost his life while trying to extinguish the flames to ensure no one remained inside the aircraft. He was the sole fatality in this disaster. The Boeing 777-300, worth hundreds of millions of dollars, was completely destroyed. It became the first 777 ever to be lost entirely due to an accident and fire. The EK521 accident, though tragic, provided invaluable lessons for the global aviation industry. The crash prompted a reassessment of cockpit automation systems. Emirates and other airlines strengthened simulator training to prepare pilots for situations involving sudden loss of engine thrust. Flight EK521 will always be remembered as an event of both tragedy and triumph. It was a tragedy in terms of the selfless sacrifice of the firefighter and the loss of the aircraft, but also a triumph for aviation safety, as 300 lives were saved thanks to rigorous training and timely evacuation procedures.